So, good morning, Talia. I'm so thrilled to have you join us on Happy Health Podcast. Welcome.
Thank you, Rita.
Yeah, and I'm just thrilled about this topic about Ayurveda. And it's pretty exciting to look at your background because you are trained in the Ayurvedic tradition, you're a nutritionist, you're a chef, you're a yoga instructor, and you have also authored 3 cookbooks, which is no small feat. I know how that takes a lot of time and a lot of energy. And before we dive into all that, I would love for you to tell the viewers a little bit about your background and what actually drew you into more alternative therapies, especially the Ayurveda.
Yeah, I think I was always a little bit into alternative medicine,
Yeah.
or maybe more than a little bit, because when I was 21, I discovered yoga in college. I was in the wilderness in Alaska for a quarter of school, and they taught us yoga like in the middle of this amazing, wilderness setting. And it was just so profound for me and very emotionally, very grounding and healing. So I had been practicing yoga for about 7 years, maybe no longer than that, maybe 8 years, and went to become a yoga teacher. And at the yoga teacher training, we were introduced to Ayurveda.
Mm-hmm.
But I also come from a background of, pretty severe emotional trauma
Mm-hmm.
and eating disorders, autoimmune, all of that.
Yeah.
And at the time that I went to become a yoga teacher, I was in the process of healing from the eating disorder, but the body image and the body dysmorphia was still really strong.
Yeah.
And so when Ayurveda was introduced as this body typing, overview, it was triggering, and I didn't totally connect with it because I was triggered by it. Because also, right, we took a written test. We didn't know anything about it. We took a written test, and then we were supposed to determine like our constitution, and I got it wrong. And so it was also standing up with people that were a lot bigger than me, and was just, it just kind of hit the wrong nerve. However,
Really big triggers. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and I actually think that's pretty common.
Mm-hmm.
And then at that same yoga teacher training, I broke out in psoriasis all over my body, which is autoimmune, fire trapped in the skin, really intense. I say I broke out overnight, and it was really and truly that, like waking up and being like, what is going on? Like, I'm covered in all of these rashes and welts, and I'm so itchy. And there was a guy at the teacher training, a homeopath from England, who did some muscle testing on me with some of the food that I had brought with me, because I already thought I ate really well. Like, I'd even brought my own, special stash of food to this yoga teacher training. And he was like, I really think you need to find someone who can help you figure out what you're doing with your nutrition. Something is off. So those two things merged at a really core time. And I did already know what Western medicine had to offer for psoriasis, which was steroid-based creams. So nothing internal, no dietary changes, just a topical cream. And I just didn't want that solution. I didn't feel like it would last for very long. So I was on a mission to find a holistic healthcare system or practitioner, and then found, kind of stumbled upon Ayurveda again when I met my teacher, who she just had a booth at a health fair.
Mm-hmm.
And there was just something about her energy and the smells coming from the booth. I think they were serving chai, or there was just something so magical and potent about what she was representing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was drawn to it, and then had my first session with her just a few weeks later, and was, immediately fascinated. And I think the most important thing, especially for our viewers, is I felt so deeply seen and understood on a physical and emotional level that no other doctor or practitioner or even therapist had ever had the insight and the communication to express to me, so that it really landed. And I was able to run with it and immediately saw so much change. I mean, within the first 6 weeks of practicing Ayurveda, I saw significant shifts in my health that were undeniable, and that just put me on a path of, no looking back.
Wow, that's an extraordinary story and life moment. And how long ago was that?
2001.
2001. Wow. Mm-hmm. Wow. And so you started the journey yourself, because the thing about Ayurveda, I don't know a lot about it. I know a little bit, but I'd love for you to talk to our viewers about Ayurveda, because it seems like it's got so many different parts to it. It seems like it's a diagnostic tool. There's food involved. There's also body work involved as well.
Yeah, it's really a full spectrum medicinal health system that's rooted in the 5 elements. So in Ayurveda, it's a little different than Chinese medicine, the way that the 5 elements are communicated and expressed, but they are sister sciences. So, if you've ever been with a Chinese doctor, it won't be totally unfamiliar.
Mm-hmm.
But the 5 elements in Ayurveda are ether, air, fire, water, and earth. And I've got a new puppy here, so just looking down or doing things, or you hear crying, it's my baby. Those 5 elements in Ayurveda get broken down into 3 organizational principles, which is really the way that we relate to the elements as they arise in our body, mind, and spirit. And those are what we call the doshas. And dosha, most people now have heard of Ayurveda, and if they have, they're like, oh yeah, the doshas, it's vata, pitta, and kapha.
Right.
And dosha literally is translated to mean that which most easily goes out of balance. Mm-hmm. So what our dosha is showing us is, okay, we're all made up of all 5 elements. You can't be made up of just 1 or 2. You've got to be made up of all 5. But we all have a tendency and, strengths and weaknesses in 1 or more of those elements. And your dosha basically says, like, this is where you're going to go out of balance the most, because you kind of dwell or possess the most of these 1, 2, or 3 elements. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Some people are tridoshic. They have more of a balance of all 3 doshas in their constitution, but most of us tend to be one predominant dosha with a secondary dosha trailing behind.
So when then people do become out of balance for whatever reason, then you approach them from what dosha they are, and then do you work with herbs? I know you work with food because you're a chef. And also, again, the body work. So how do you approach someone who comes to you that is out of balance?
Yeah. So there's a couple different things. I want to make sure I answer all the parts of your question.
Yeah.
So first of all, if you, Rita, came to me and you were like, Talya, I don't know what's going on. I'm so gassy. I'm a little bit nauseous. I have, like abdominal cramping and just all this gas. Mm-hmm. I would hear that and be like, oh, I hear a lot of air and ether symptoms. Right. So that's what you're coming to me for. And I want to help you change that. So I would help you change that elementally in your body through food, nutrition, body work, essential oils, herbs, right? The kind of anything natural I can use as a remedy, even a certain type of yoga or exercise, even the time you go to sleep at night and whether or not you take naps. Okay. Mm-hmm. However, just because you come to me with those symptoms does not mean that that is your core constitution. Mm. And so I personally, as a practitioner, I want to know who my client is on a deeper level. So anybody who works with me, we always start with a pulse reading where I get to establish, okay, this is who you are constitutionally. This is what's happening symptomatically right now.
Mm-hmm.
So that I can really keep that in mind, the whole picture of the person, not just the symptom. Because if it's just the symptom and I give a remedy, it doesn't mean the remedy won't work. It probably will, but I'm not keeping in mind the whole person, the holistic approach.
Mm-hmm.
So I personally think that's super important.
Mm-hmm.
And food is, you know, the reason why I even became an Ayurvedic chef is that was the primary remedy, is how do you change your food to match what your core constitution needs to thrive, but also to heal whatever temporary symptoms are arising, which could be based on the weather, the season,
emotions,
emotional health, stress,
so
travel.
So you just mentioned that you're an Ayurvedic chef. So is that a very specific training that you do? That is, you're chefing in that modality only?
You absolutely can train to be an Ayurvedic chef. Like one of my colleagues she wrote one of my all-time favorite Ayurvedic cookbooks. Her name is Divya Alter. And, oh my goodness, such a baby.
You need to give that little guy some love.
She's right here. She has a cooking school in New York City. So that's one of the things on my bucket list, even though, you know, I'll probably end up being a teacher for part of it when I come. But, you know, for me, I call myself an Ayurvedic chef. My teacher and I just worked on developing my skills in the kitchen when I was apprenticing her, because it was such a passion of mine and it just came really naturally to me. So I don't have like I personally didn't go to like Ayurvedic chef school, but now they do exist.
Wow.
This was 18 years ago and that wasn't happening then.
So is the foundation of Ayurvedic chef working with the separate doshas and foods for each of those body types?
It is, but it's also as a general, you know, chef modality. It's creating food that is highly digestible, that people will feel like just as energized or more energized after eating that food than they did before they ate it. So, you know, because a lot of times food makes us feel tired, lethargic, heavy, and Ayurvedic food is really, it's the primary purpose of it is to be as digestible as possible. And when you're really digesting your food, this is where kind of the magic of Ayurveda happens. When you're truly being nourished by what you eat and what you drink and eat it, and you know, the way that you're caring for your body, then your energy levels go up, your vitality increases, your sense of connection with yourself is more tangible. Like I lead Ayurvedic cleanse programs every season, and we're kind of right now wrapping up the spring cleanse. And, you know, as in all, I think, online courses, there's a certain group of people who are especially vocal and who share a lot. And I've been reading what that group has been writing, and all of them are expressing some form or another of, wow, number one, I didn't even know that I could feel this good.
Wow.
So this is like a new, okay, I didn't know that that was available, just from changing primarily the way that I eat and what I eat and aligning myself with the seasons and, you know, my constitution. But also how much empowerment they feel around being able to shift small or large health issues that arise. And I have to admit, that's really one of the things that I'm most passionate about when it comes to Ayurveda, of just how much control, although I don't like to use the word control, but how much power we have in our own hands
Mm-hmm.
to determine the state of our health and well-being.
Mm-hmm.
Like to not be reliant on doctors or to feel completely in the dark. Like, okay, I feel crappy and I have no idea why. Like there's this system of healing that explains to you, well,
Yeah.
here's why. It's showing you the cause.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the cause shows you, the connection to the effect.
Yeah.
And then it's like, wow, there's something I can do about this. And a lot of it is already in my kitchen.
Right. Or easy to access.
Or easy to access and pretty inexpensive in the big picture.
So
too.
I'm kind of curious in this tradition, in the Ayurvedic tradition, about meat. And there are so many different diets out there, as you well know, everything from eating raw foods to ketogenic diets that rely heavily on meat. There are just so many issues around food. So is the Ayurvedic tradition, do they rely on meat? Do they go towards vegetarian or vegan or dairy products? Do you use dairy? So if you could talk a little bit about that, that'd be awesome.
Sure. So Ayurveda originated in India, but there's also Ayurveda that blossomed in China and Tibet and much colder climates. So, and also the way Ayurveda is rooted primarily in Hinduism and Buddhism. Hinduism they very much are a vegetarian, it's a culture, a religion that focuses around vegetarianism, whereas Buddhism, not necessarily. There's different facets of it, but some of it, yes. So most Ayurveda is a vegetarian system, relies heavily on dairy, really reveres the cow, like ghee is a holy food, milk is a holy food. But there are Ayurvedic traditions that do incorporate meat. They're just not, that's more Tibetan and Chinese Ayurveda.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as much in the forefront. So
Right.
To be honest, it just depends on who you talk to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Myself and my teacher, Anna Batdorf, because her lineage is, she studied with a Tibetan doctor and she studied with Dr. Lad, who is the Indian Ayurvedic practitioner truly responsible for bringing Ayurveda to the West and training practically every practitioner that there is. If Dr. Lad wasn't your direct teacher, he was probably your teacher's teacher, which is, for me, I've studied with him some, but my teacher is definitely his direct, student. And if you study Ayurveda with Dr. Lad, it's vegetarian,
Mm-hmm.
but we use food as medicine. So for me, and whatever you want to call it, a lineage or not, I agree with my teacher that food is medicinal. And I do see students and clients who, whether on a temporary basis or on a more long-term basis, can use and need to use animal products as medicinal food for their bodies. That being said, Ayurveda is a lens, it's a perspective, because everything is always about the elements. Like if somebody comes to me and they've got a lot of inflammation, I've got to be like, okay, that's fire. And then my next thought is, what's causing the fire? Sometimes fire creates too much fire. A fire can just burn too hot and then it starts to spread and just get way too inflamed. But sometimes excess wind can cause a fire, right? Like there's a little cigarette butt on the floor of the forest and a big wind comes through. Now it's a forest fire. It wasn't the cigarette butt by itself that created the fire. It was the wind kicking it forward. So in that regard, if I've got someone who's got inflammation, so they're turning to like a ketogenic diet because they've heard it's anti-inflammatory or whatever, I can still help them place the Ayurvedic lens of wisdom and practicality on top of that ketogenic diet, so that it's not just blind faith in more fat, more protein, less carbs. It's like, what kind of fat, what kind of protein? Are you adding spices? What drinks are you having, throughout the day that can also help to calm and soothe whatever is going on for you, which in this example is inflammation.
Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I love Ayurveda for that reason too, because it can be a sister science to practically, really to any diet or food plan. Like, I wrote a book called The Ayurvedic Vegan Kitchen. And at the time in 2012, when it was published, that was the first and only vegan cookbook dedicated to understanding veganism through the Ayurvedic perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Now I've seen that there's a few more books like that, but it was the only book like that at the time. And it really made a big impact for the vegan community because they felt limited. Like, I can't practice Ayurveda because I'm not eating dairy or ghee. And it's like, no, it's just, cashews. You can make milk out of cashews, and that can replace the unctuous and, creamy quality of milk, as one example, right?
Yeah.
We were just finding all these alternatives, but it's only because we dial it back to the elements.
Right. Well, that's really fantastic. And in terms of body work, what's that?
It makes sense. Does it all make sense the way?
Oh, it makes complete sense. I mean, I think it's a beautiful system, and I wanted to look now at the body work aspect of it. So do you feel that if someone comes to you and really needs to heal one aspect, is the body work essential? Is it as important as the food part? Do people just come for the food and not the body work, or the body work and not the food? So talk about that relationship a little bit.
Okay, this is a really cool question. So here's the thing. The body, right? You know this, and I'm sure your viewers know this. Like, the body is a complex organism. It's alive. It's constantly shifting and changing and being affected by all kinds of external forces. So, in Ayurveda, it's really powerful to start with food, because food is all day, every day. And I even take that a little bit farther in my own practice and teaching and say, we got to start with food, but we've also got to start with hydration. Mm-hmm. How are we hydrating our bodies? Because digestion is the root of all health. If everything is about, like, even the difference between keto, paleo, vegan, vegetarian, like, if somebody's, what should I be doing? I encourage people to look at, well, what's going to help you digest the best? Like, some people really do have a hard time digesting grains. Mm-hmm. Some people have a really hard time digesting meat. And so we need to look at those relationships and be willing to spend some time experimenting with food to figure out what really works. And Ayurveda's got lots of great ideas. So it's a really smart system to start with. But the body work is what kind of, I don't know if I want to say it this way, but let me think of a different way to say it. The body work is kind of what pulls it all together. It takes the nourishment that you're getting from food and learning to nourish yourself in a really intelligent way. And it takes that nourishment, in my opinion, like 1,000 times deeper. So I'm very passionate about the bodywork aspect of Ayurveda, which can be as simple as dry brushing to start, right? Getting your lymphatic fluid on the move, because what you eat, what you digest, is primarily feeding your lymph and your blood. Then it's going out to all of your organs and your tissues. I mean, the phrase "you are what you eat" is so literal,
right?
Especially when you take it to this like microcellular level.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But if your lymph is stagnant, and your circulation is dull and not really moving, you will gain some health benefits from changing your food, but you got to take it to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's almost, I think of it like peeling back the layers of an onion.
Mm-hmm.
Every time you kind of, you satiate that outer layer so that it's like, oh great, wow, I can peel away and I'm no longer needed. Now there's a new layer that arises, and Ayurveda really asks us to examine each new layer and say, okay, now what do I need?
Right. Mm-hmm.
What's happening? What elementally is shifting in me now? Your core constitution doesn't change, right? If you're, Pitta predominant, which is the fire and water based dosha, you will always be that. But your current symptoms can constantly be shifting,
Right.
especially if you travel a lot, if you have a lot of screen time, if your life is stressful, if you're a new mom, if you're perimenopausal, if you're menopausal, like whatever.
Yeah.
So I really think it comes down to awakening our body's intelligence,
Mm-hmm.
and again, empowering ourselves with so many tools that can really shift things in a day.
Yeah.
Versus, weeks and weeks of wondering.
Yeah. Because you mentioned the lymph system. So does the Ayurvedic bodywork, is that predominantly around working with the lymph?
In the way I have been trained and the way that I practice, both lymph and digestion are basics 101. So we always start there. Always, always, always. Nothing else is going to change unless lymph changes, unless digestion changes.
Right.
So there is a ton of lymphatic emphasis in Ayurvedic bodywork, but there's a lot of emphasis on all the tissues,
right.
And all of the internal organs. I mean, one of the primary ways that Ayurvedic bodywork is differentiated from Chinese medicine bodywork is in Chinese medicine, they use acupuncture and needles and other things too. But those needles are usually stimulating a meridian that correlates back to an organ, right? And in Ayurvedic body work, we are also working those meridians, but we're doing it with our hands and with different tools, and with marma points, which is basically like an acupressure point.
And you guys also use a lot of oils too, right? Specific oils?
Yes. So, if you were to come in for body work, which you can because you're local, right? That's the only thing with having an online business is I want to help people get the body work too. So I do a lot of teaching about how to administer your own body work. But of course, there's nothing that compares to going and getting body work from an experienced.
Of course not. Yeah.
But if you, Rita, came in for body work and I had never read your pulse and I didn't really know that much about you Ayurvedically, I would immediately start to learn about you by putting my hands on your body. I would immediately get information. And so a lot of times a client comes, if I don't already know them, although most of the time I do, and I put my hands on their body, and that's when I decide what kind of oil I'm going to use and what kind of pressure, pace, whether it's going to be quick movements or slow, how much, density is there to the tissue that I need to break through, or how much ropiness is there to the tissue that I need to tenderize.
Yeah.
It's still all elemental.
Yeah. It sounds fantastic. Sign me up.
Oh yeah, let's sign you up.
I know. It sounds really beautiful. So we've covered, the chef and also the body work and the Ayurveda. Tell us a little bit about, because you offer a lot. You also do international trips, don't you, that focus on Ayurveda? And so tell our audience a little bit about your offerings.
Okay. Well, yeah. And just, just to be clear also, like, my background initially was in yoga. And yoga is my personal haven.
Mhm.
So I have studied so much yoga. I've been practicing for, I don't know, 25, I don't know what year it is. So I don't remember. 26 years, I think, this year. Um, so, you can, just like you can with food, you can plug Ayurveda into the type of yoga that you're doing. So that was kind of my initial offering, was kind of incorporating Ayurveda with yoga. And I still do that in all of my courses. But the way I primarily work with people now is I am planning an Ayurvedic retreat for women that's happening in March of 2020. And we're going to do Ayurvedic cooking. It'll be kind of a kickoff to a spring cleanse. And that's one of my primary offerings, is teaching my students and my clients how to dive in and make Ayurveda experiential. And so I do that through an Ayurvedic seasonal eating cleanse program. And even though it's called a cleanse, and it is detoxifying for sure, the emphasis is not on deprivation of any kind. It's really about awakening our senses to what's happening now, like practicing presence, and then, opening up the possibilities of, look at all of the amazing food and nourishment that's available to us in this season, that because it's available in this season will automatically start to take care of the excess that we all tend to have in any given season. Like, we're just finishing up the spring cleanse, and spring is a heavy, wet, dense season in terms of what arises in our bodies as excess.
Mm-hmm.
So we've all been clearing, it's called ama. So we've been clearing all this ama, and people who had chronic congestion for years, or allergies, or, hadn't been able to lose like this stubborn 10 or 15 pounds, are like, oh my gosh, such a huge shift from shifting the way that they approach their nourishment. So that's one of the things that I do every season. And I also have a program called Ayurveda Starter School, which is a 6-week course that's just like kind of really getting your feet wet, and building out a roadmap for how you can start incorporating Ayurveda into your everyday. Because it's really just these little baby steps,
Right. Mm-hmm.
of, every morning I make sure I drink a certain amount of water with, certain herbs or minerals or electrolytes added to them, so that I'm making sure that my tissue is receiving the water, absorbing the water,
Mm-hmm.
which also means then I'm so much more likely to absorb and assimilate all the nutrition that I'm eating,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's just these step-by-step little habits that we start to, bring in or transform,
Mm-hmm.
especially to replace habits that don't really serve us.
Yeah.
And then I work with people all over the world with private consultations. So there's multiple ways to read pulse. I don't have to have my fingers on somebody's wrists in order to read their pulse.
Mm-hmm.
I can read pulse when I have my hands on their body for Bodywork. And I also can read pulse just by having a conversation with somebody and asking the right questions. And because, right, I've been studying Ayurveda for 18
Right.
years,
Right.
knowing how to interpret their answers and get to the root and the core of what's happening for them. So yeah, there is a lot that I offer, but it always comes back to
Mm-hmm.
my client, my student, understanding themselves on a really profound level that then gives them access to so much change and possibility and hope, as well as a sustainable system that's really super pleasurable and delicious and
Yeah.
fun if you're into that kind of thing. I mean, there's, who Ayurveda is not for is somebody who just wants everything to be handed to them. They don't want to do any of their own work. they just want to be taking a pill.
Right.
Then, you know, Western medicine can be your thing. But that's, even though there are herbal supplements I give, it's I would never just say like, oh, just take this and that's all you need to do.
Right. Yeah.
But, you know, we
I
also
appreciate that. I appreciate that very much, because it is really about someone making a shift, an internal shift and an emotional shift in many ways. And it takes focus. It takes some attention. It takes some time.
Yeah. And it takes a desire
Yes.
to be, you know, to want, you know, I think everybody wants to be healthy and happy.
Right.
And what are you willing, what are you actually willing to do? And I don't even think of it as a sacrifice, because again, Ayurveda is very pleasurable. But you know, there's therapeutic.
Yeah.
There's still, you've got to feel it to heal it. And there's, you know, therapeutic discomfort that if you're willing to walk through the fire, on the other side is like radiance and, you know, feeling amazing. But you've got to be willing to walk through some discomfort to get there. And I think Ayurveda does an amazing job of holding our hands as we move through the discomfort, and making the discomfort as short and as
sort of manageable as possible.
Manageable, yeah.
Well, we're going to have on our website all the ways that people can connect with you. And I just really want to thank you so much for the work that you're doing in the world and for sharing all this with our viewers. So thank you, Talya, so much for your time this morning. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you, Rita. It's such an honor.